Welcome to this edition of Lancaster Perspective. I'm Mike Miller, and my special guest from Job and Family Services, Kristi Burre, the Director of Adult Protective Services and Child Protective Services, and Mindy VanBibber. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Mindy is supervisor there. Mm-hmm. Everybody doing fine? Everybody doing all right?
Yeah. Everything's good. Everything's good. Busy as usual.
See, they're laughing because I had to steal a pink pen, and it keeps rolling off. June is World Elder Abuse Month, and June 15th is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And you guys are obviously heavily involved in that, and
absolutely,
just all the things that are going on. We appreciate all the efforts that you do. But let's talk a little bit about protective services. Tell the public, what do you do? What's going on?
So Adult Protective Services investigates allegations of abuse, neglect, or exploitation of elders 60 years and older. When someone calls in and has a concern for an elderly person, what happens is we will take the referral, and then I myself, since I'm the supervisor, I will screen that referral based on some of the state guidelines and what the state says this is abuse, neglect, or exploitation. But if that report is screened in, it's assigned to one of my caseworkers, and then they begin an investigation into those allegations to make sure that elder is safe.
Can anybody report this, or is it anonymous? Talk a little bit about it.
You can be anonymous if you wish. However, if you call in and do give your name, we never give that out to anybody. I think there's some misconceptions there about my caseworker told me or so-and-so told me it was a certain person that called, but we would never do that. It's actually against the law. But if you want to be anonymous, you can as well. Anybody can call in and make a report, and if you wish to be anonymous, you can do that.
Our Protective Services Department at JFS, we're one of the 4 program areas at Job and Family Services. We have both CPS and APS under the same umbrella. So we're available 24 hours a day, every single day of the year, during business hours, and we are taking calls throughout the day, both for concerns for children and the elderly. And then after hours, we have an after hours on-call team that goes through the sheriff's office. So yes, we are available all day long, every single day, to make sure that we're available and accessible for any concerns.
If someone wants to report, phone number, website, what's the easiest thing to do?
So our call center is 740-652-7887, and that's during our business hours. After hours, if it's an emergency and it cannot wait till the next business day, you can always call the Fairfield County Sheriff, and that's our on-call emergency system.
Mindy, you mentioned earlier that the state gives you regulations. Does the county get to make their own regulations, or is it all coming from the state?
It's all coming from the state. They give us guidelines, screening guidelines, what we call them, that basically guides us when we're making a decision, because it's a big decision to get involved in someone's life. So we don't want to become involved if it's not needed. We don't want to intrude, but we also want to make sure that we're maintaining our obligation and we're keeping people safe.
Ohio is a state mandated but county administered state for child and adult protection. So there's only 9 states in the country that are structured the way in which we are. So yes, we have mandates at the state level. We follow the Ohio Revised Code, the Ohio Administrative Code that outlines what we're mandated to do for both child and adult protection. But you have 88 counties that are responsible for. Each have their own hotlines. They're each responsible for administering child and adult protection. So we are a little more unique than some of those states that are structured differently.
Now, you said 9 states. Why is there? What's the difference?
So there, I'll take Texas for example. It's a state mandated, state administered state. So there's one hotline for the entire state that's taking the calls from across the state, kind of like what Mindy's describing that process. And then they are farming out that information to different regions, and they still have agencies and all of that. It's just the way in which it's administered is very different. I would say that we do have a lot more community involvement. We're very dependent on our community and the partners that we work with to make sure that we're doing all that we can to help locally our children and families, and the way in which we're structured. It requires us to do that, but it's nice to work with the community in the way that we need to.
To the viewer that's maybe not has no idea about how bad is it in Fairfield County. I mean, adult, children. I know it's. I've working at JFS for a while. I know, but to the average viewer, like, oh, it's not that bad here in Fairfield County.
Our calls have risen, and that goes both for CPS and APS. We're getting a lot more calls. We're opening a lot more cases. So it typically, if people don't know kind of what we do and kind of the volume of things that we handle,
Right.
it can be something where you're like, that doesn't happen in my neighborhood. I don't know, what that looks like, but it's on the rise. And for adult protective services, what I can say is exploitation cases is our big one right now. Most of our cases are exploitation cases, and I believe that has somewhat to do with the opioid epidemic, because we have adult children and adult grandchildren who are, moving in or taking advantage of our elderly in some shape or form, whether it be accessing their money, threatening them to get money, stealing medications, or basically just kind of like living off of them. And then we also see I'm seeing a lot more joint cases with CPS, where we have a case with a family member who has children, but then also with the elder, and they're all living in the same home. So we're seeing a lot more of that too.
How would you know physical abuse? I mean, if I went to see somebody's grandmother and I said, well, she's got bruises on her arm, but it's maybe from needles, I don't know.
Yeah, so it can be the general, what you would think it would be: bruises, broken bones, unexplained injuries of any kind. But it can also be multiple emergency room visits. It can become emotional when they act differently when someone else is around, when they react differently to somebody who they were okay with before. Those can be signs too.
And I'm assuming that a lot of reports don't go reported. I mean, incidents don't go reported.
Yeah, so we know about 1 in 14 cases actually gets reported. So
1 in 14?
Yeah, so for every case that's called in, Mike, 13 more are going unnoticed and unreported.
Is that because people just don't want to get involved, or?
I think there are several reasons. I think one is that, yes, maybe they don't want to get involved. I think one big one is they don't know how to get involved, because there's still a lot of people out there that don't know who we are or what we do. So, I always encourage people, just call. And you don't have to have, proof. You don't have to be sure that something is happening. Right. All you have to have is a suspicion. So that's our job, to investigate and find out and put a stop to it. You don't have to feel obligated to have a lot of information, just whatever you have.
I think too people are, the community is much more likely to report child abuse than elder abuse. And so when you ask yourself, why would that be? I think it really is about just not recognizing or not wanting to believe that someone would take advantage of the elderly that way. Almost 90% of the perpetrators of elder abuse and neglect and exploitation are family members. They're not strangers. So you hear a lot about the elderly being taken advantage of by calls, or somebody coming to fix the roof and not finishing it. And yes, of course that happens. We need to do a lot of community outreach, but I think a lot of people throughout our neighborhoods think that's when the elderly get duped, and that's not necessarily the case. And it's happening in all neighborhoods, in all areas of our county, and that's why we link a lot of it to the opioid epidemic. As a result of the opioid epidemic, it's impacted all socioeconomic classes and families and neighborhoods that even perhaps our agency wouldn't have been involved with in the past. But it's definitely impacting the elderly in many of the same ways that it is children. I think it's still just hard for people to believe that that's possible.
And you guys handle. How many cases do you guys get involved with a year?
Well, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but what I
you.
can tell you right now, I have three caseworkers that cover the entire county. So we're small but mighty. They do a great job. But what I can tell you right now is, at the moment, they have an average of about 20 cases, which is a lot higher than what it was when I started in this position almost 2 years ago. It was about, I'd say, 9 to 12 cases was an average.
Wow.
And that's open cases. So that's not even the calls that we're getting that we don't open.
Right.
The volume continues to increase in general just because of population growth. So the population growth in our county, just because of the growth in our county, especially the northwest area, definitely continues to increase the child population. But now because of the baby boomer generation, the elderly population is going to continue to grow. We have seen almost a 75% increase in the volume with APS reports over the last few years. We're up to over 7,000 calls a year just for concerns with children and the elderly. I did just look at, just to be able to compare months, and in April of this year, it was, when you compared it to every single month last year, it was the highest number of reports that we have ever received just this past April, almost double the number of referrals that we got compared to the months in 2017. So that's not slowing down. I don't foresee that slowing down at all. And in fact, with population growth and aging, it's going to continue to grow.
And if I remember right, Ohio ranks 50th in funding. Is that right?
We are, like I said, we are a state mandated but county administered state, and in our state, historically in our state, it's been a county responsibility primarily to meet all of these needs. We get very little funding from the state of Ohio. Adult Protective Services actually saw an increase a couple years ago, and they now get $30,000 a year to administer adult protection for the entire county. $30,000 a year. We used to get $5,000 a year for APS. So it is an example of an unfunded mandate that puts us as the counties to be put in a position to be completely responsible as taxpayers, as the community, to kind of step up and do what we need to do for the elderly and our loved ones in our community. So that our levy that we just passed last year, it is a combined tax levy for both children and the elderly, vulnerable children and the elderly who are at risk, and that's definitely what is completely supporting APS. CPS, though, still, yes, we're the last. We still get the least amount of funding. So we are most of the funding in our county is local. We're grateful for that because the levy and our county commissioners support, and then the federal funds that we're able to drill down as well.
So what can the community do to help out, to help you guys out? I mean, I know reporting, but again, some people don't want to report. What do you need from the community to help out, other than financial, which you're getting now?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, just be the eyes for our children and our elderly. I like to use this comparison when talking about, Kristi had mentioned earlier, people are more likely to report for children, I think, than elderly, and there's reasons for that. But I think that I always like to use this comparison. If you see a child walking down the street alone, little toddler, you're certainly going to step in and do something. But if you see an adult walking, an elderly person maybe walking down the street, you're not going to really think about it. But they might be lost. They may have wandered, and they may not know where they are. They may be hurt. They may need help as well. And so I think that just the general, it's an adult versus a child, and adults you can usually take care of themselves. Just that mentality, I think, is a big reason. But basically, reporting, obviously, for both children and elderly, but just keep being the eyes and ears for those people, for your neighbors, for your family members, for anybody in your neighborhood, but also for the elderly, checking on them, especially right now when the temperatures are rising. If you can just check on your neighbor, your family member, the person down the street, can mean a lot to them.
Do you ever have seminars or open houses that people can come in and learn more about?
We do a lot of outreach and training, and so we also have our website, but I am out doing things like this a lot, and I really enjoy it. So, if anyone has interest, they can certainly contact our agency, whether it's just, hey, I have a question and would like to speak with somebody, all the way up to, hey, I've got a staff meeting for my staff, or can you come and speak to a group about child and elder abuse. We do both. We do a lot of those things, so there's always available trainings, and I've done anything from 15, 20 minutes up to a 6-hour training. So there's a lot of availability there, and anyone can contact us
We
for that.
do have an updated website too, so there's a lot of information, and it is, although we are a protective services department, we've separated it so it's very clear as to what to look for, the signs, and then how to report things for adult protective services and for child protective services. Our other program areas at JFS are on there as well. It's www.fcjfs.org. I'll mention too, for the month of June, which is when we're really trying to get out and raise awareness for elder abuse, we also have a Facebook page. So it's Elder Abuse Awareness Fairfield County, and we're putting a lot of information up there, facts, data to kind of demonstrate and paint a picture for what's really going on.
And again, World Elder Abuse Awareness Day is June 15th. Wear purple. And you guys are taking photos. You want people to send stuff to you? Talk
Yeah,
about
we
that.
would like to have it, whether it's an individual or a group, just to send your photos to wearpurple@jfs.org. I'm sorry, fcjfs.org.
Yes.
Sorry about that. So wear purple at fcjfs.org. If you could send your photos of yourself or your group wearing purple, we will retweet those or repost those on Facebook, just to raise awareness and to show people that you care and that you're thinking about our elders.
How, again, you work this every day, the opioid issue we've talked about. For the viewer that just doesn't know, we don't have that problem. Talk a little bit about how that's affected what you guys do every day.
Well, I will start with saying that there's been a big focus, and I'm grateful for the more attention and focus on how the opioid epidemic that started years ago has ultimately impacted the children in our communities. What I don't think people realize is that it's impacted the elderly in many of the same ways. The addiction associated with substances such as opioids is something that we've never seen before on our caseload. So addiction and substance abuse by parents or by family members of the elderly is not something new. That has been something that we've always, dealt with. But when it comes to these types of substances and the impact that it has on someone's life and the ability that it has to take over somebody's life, their kids cannot come first, and their elderly loved ones cannot come first, and that's why we're seeing that with those elderly cases that they're moving back in. They need them for supports. They need them, and our elderly, our number one goal is to try to keep them in their own community and their own homes, and so they want their family members to live with them and help take care of them, and so it's a balance with us trying to not just focus on the elderly person that we're working with, but work with their entire family unit so that they can be together safely the same way in which we do with kids. And in the past, primarily with the elderly, there was a lot more self-neglect and isolation that that we were sifting through, so we didn't necessarily work with all the extended family members as much as we need to. That's critical now because our elderly need and want their loved ones to help take care of them so they can stay in their own homes and community, but we need to help them do it safely. So it's been a bigger impact than what we thought. We did a good job of monitoring as a state the pills, but when that happened, a lot of people were left to resort to other things, and it just spun out of control.
It's just a huge epidemic.
Yes. Yeah.
One of the other things that I want to talk about, you have a 5K race coming up
Yes.
down the road, but let's talk a little bit about that.
Right. So, again, we're grateful for the renewal of the levy that our protective services levy that we had last year. We're going to keep, though, moving forward with our Citizens to Protect Children and the Elderly volunteer group in this county to keep raising awareness and, in this case, give back. So we have a 5K on September 22nd. Yes, September 22nd at 9 a.m. at Victory Park in Pickerington. You can go to Citizens Protect Children and the Elderly, Fairfield County, on Facebook to get all of the information. We're going to keep advertising it. We'll probably be on here again to talk about it. But it is a way it'll be our third annual, so that's exciting. It's in Pickerington. It's going to be the same route as it was last year. It's growing each year. And this year, as a way to kind of give back and say thank you to the community, a portion of our proceeds are going to go to a nonprofit organization in the community. So Project Fort, which is a group that we've been closely aligned with. That's the Fairfield Overdose Response Team that is responding, come together, and kind of a grassroots group that is now getting some funding through the Attorney General's office, and I know it's very supported by the Commissioner's office to respond to accidental overdoses. So although this is the Citizens to Protect and it's our annual 5K to support, that levy moving forward, we want to be able to kind of give back. So we've chosen Project Fort to give a portion of the proceeds this year.
Now, do people sign up ahead of time, sign up the day of the race, just to get it out there?
We'll take anything, but yeah, you can sign up now, and you can get there through Citizens Protect Children and the Elderly on Facebook. We're going to be sending a lot more out there, though. But sure, it's open now. I think it's through Speedy Sneakers is coordinating it for us, so you can get there going, through that as well. But by all means, people show up the day of the race.
Is there a charge for it? Is there?
I think right now we're at $20, $20 or $25. It may, that's kind of the early bird rate, so it may go up just a bit, but it's definitely affordable.
That's I know it. What do you see in the future? As far as I know, the opioid that's going to happen, but what do you see changes to help the elderly and the children? Major changes maybe coming from the state or federal government?
I'm optimistic, probably more optimistic than I have been in past years. I'm optimistic. I'm excited about the work that our partners are doing in our community. We're really partnering with the private providers who are providing treatment and behavioral health in a different way to expedite what we need for our clients with protective services, partnering with juvenile court in different ways than we have in the past, and now we're really our agency in juvenile court is in probate court. So Judge Vandervoort is the juvenile and probate court judge who helps us with our elderly cases as well. So, but with we're partnering with the schools in very different ways. There has been some legislation passed at the federal level that is going to potentially shift our federal funding to be geared more towards preventative work instead of, for example, in the CPS world, funding being attached to kids being in foster care. So it's really about coming together as a community and strengthening families so that they can stay together and they can remain here locally, again, both for children and the elderly. So I hope to continue going down that path.
That's fantastic. That's advice that you would give maybe to somebody that knows of this but doesn't want to report it? I mean, either child abuse or elderly abuse?
What I can say is the fact that you have the opportunity to be anonymous, I would hope that if anybody suspected any type of concerns with our older adult population or children in our community, even if they just want to call to ask questions, they don't even have to identify who they are, they don't even have to identify the family that they're talking about, just to ask questions. Our screening team, and again, we're available 24 hours a day, we're used to that. We do that a lot on the phone because people aren't comfortable yet. We're trying to do more and more outreach, whether it's at nursing homes or council meetings or other public type meetings and churches. So just even if you're just curious, I would just hope that people would at least ask questions.
We want people to be comfortable and feel like that they can call in and ask those questions or give those concerns without, saying who they are. They can be anonymous, and we really encourage that because we can't get out there and do our jobs and protect a child or protect an elderly person if we don't know what's happening. And so we rely on the community a lot to be our eyes and ears to report those things to us because we can't be out there to see everything. So we just want, the main thing, we just really want people to be comfortable to be able to call and do that. And like Kristi said, we're very used to that. So we can guide you in the questions that we ask and get that information.
And we miss things too. So, I mean, I always advocate too that if we've missed something or you don't think that the right decisions have been made, then I always advocate for, it's always a learning opportunity for all of my staff. So I always advocate to call back, ask questions, ask why certain decisions were made, any opportunities that we can get, and maybe we missed something.
Right.
So that kind of communication is important. And like I said, we want to approach people in a way to strengthen, not be punitive. And really just focus on stability and keeping families together.
One more time, phone numbers, Facebook, websites, whatever people can go to.
Sure. So if you want to report abuse or neglect, and this is for a child or an elderly person, same number for either, it would be 740-652-7887, and that'll get you to what we call a screener, and they're going to ask you some questions, and that's how a report gets created. If it's after business hours and it's an emergency, it can't wait till the next day, you can contact the sheriff's office, and that's anytime through the night. So we really are 24/7, availability. Our Twitter is at fcjfs.org, and our website is www.fcjfs.org.
Fantastic, ladies. It's been great having you on today.
Thank you
We
for
appreciate it.
having
We'll
us.
get you back on before September, talk about the race and all those things.
Okay,
And
alrighty.
enjoy the rest of the day today.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Lancaster Perspective. I'm Mike Miller, and remember, until we meet again, let's make a difference.